Hello, welcome to my channel, Safe Infinity. In this video, I just wanted to talk about, the idea of not having to punish ourselves forever. Like, we don't owe karma a lifetime of punishment and, all that sort of self-blame and what have you. We aren't here to suffer punishment and to, suffer for things we've done or what have you. That isn't meant to be the purpose of this sort of life experience. We are here learning and growing, and, sometimes that comes with making mistakes or what have you, especially with such, big, heavy things like trauma and stuff like that, that is so often, passed down through generations and what have you. Obviously not just being like okay with everything and just having a complete free pass, but just taking that accountability and accepting what has been done, and then forgiving yourself and others and taking the steps necessary to learn from that, to grow from that, is what we're here to do, not to punish or torment ourselves or each other. It's so easy as well to place so much, self-blame on our things for a lot of things that aren't really, our fault or, completely our fault in the grand scheme either. It's so easy to be such a harsh judge of yourself. And then so often when we are such a harsh judge of ourselves, that can kind of feed and ripple out into the greater consciousness of, the rest of humanity and the reality as well, where that sort of energy can be reflected back at you. So, not only are you blaming yourself, but then everyone else is as well. And so often, people do things, not just solely based on, being evil or something, but, more often than not, it can be, from, trauma and things like that passed down through generations, as I was saying, or certain other like actions and factors that occur in people's lives that create a sort of energetic environment that really make certain behaviors easier and others a little harder to grasp onto or to follow. And so rather than seeing things as strictly like good or bad in that sense, seeing it more as like an energetic environment of, where we are these, energetic souls and beings trying to kind of, evolve through and overcome sort of certain energetic environments and parameters, but how it can be, obviously easy to be swept up in such things, kind of like an addiction, if you will, someone having an addiction to something, that doesn't define who they are or what their soul is or anything like that. It's like a thing that they need to overcome and may, just need to work on ways of overcoming that. And it's the same with all sorts of things that we as humans do in our lives. We don't need it to dictate our experience for the rest of our lives, or a whole thing of mass punishment and torment and all these sort of terrible things, just recycling all that pain and all those more dense and negative energies and frequencies. Instead, we're here to kind of try to overcome such dense energies and frequencies, which can be difficult to do at times when you're really down here in the sludge, so to speak. So, just having grace for yourself and for others in that aspect. We're not only treating others with love, as they say, treat people like family or like your neighbors or what have you, but also treating yourself with that same love that you would give others, and that same grace and forgiveness that you may give to others as well. Sometimes it's so easy to hold ourselves to such a higher standard than we would anyone else. And kind of knowing at the end of the day, we all are one in that aspect. We all come from the same source energy fundamentally. And so anyone else doing anything else, and you as well, like it all is you, it all is us doing that. If you were to be in their shoes, with a bit of source energy that went through the exact pathway that they did, you would be doing the exact same things they did, because that is what they are, that is who they are. You know, they are that fractal of source energy that went through that pathway, and it's all one source energy. So if you were, you know, the part of that source energy that went that way, you would be doing the same things, because that is you. That literally is what's happening. That is that part of you, that greater you, that is doing that pathway and doing those things. And then you are the, you know, the other part that's went down this pathway and are doing, you know, the things that you're doing. But at the end of the day, it all is one big source energy, one big being in that aspect. And so, you know, just having that forgiveness and grace for yourself and others in that way of, you know, we are all here learning and growing, and expecting that we all have to be, you know, tormented or punished by karmic retribution, you know, for the rest of our lives or what have you, or repeated life cycles, or on such a grand scale, is just really slowing down all that process and just continuing all that dense energy and, you know, sludging through that really isn't necessary. You know, as I mentioned, still having all that accountability and such, but, you know, learning from it, growing from it in a way that you're still, you know, giving yourself the grace, you know, that you deserve and need. You know, really treating yourself and everyone else as if we literally are God in a costume with amnesia. You know, if God, you know, is in a costume with amnesia and making mistakes, are you going to damn God to an eternity in hell? Like, no, you're not. So you don't want to do that to yourself and others either, because that's literally essentially what we all are. You know, we're all kind of like God with amnesia in costumes here, learning how to, you know, kind of interact and hang out and have an enjoyable time with each other in a harmonious way. We're not here trying to, you know, punish and cause harm and all this sort of stuff that just continues cycles and cycles and cycles. You know, kind of really moving away from that hell on earth type cycle we've so often been caught up in, and really moving to that more heaven on earth cycle that we really want to, you know, achieve on a much more larger aspect for all beings. You know, regardless of who they are. Because at the end of the day, they all are that source energy, right? So, and, you know, not in a way, like I said, that we do just give everyone, you know, complete free passes or what have you, but, you know, just in a way that we're, you know, not coming down with the gavel and being so extreme in that sort of punishment and, you know, revenge or anything like that. You know, still having boundaries and expecting people to, you know, take accountability and to grow and learn and you know, rehabilitate and stuff like that, absolutely, but just in a way that isn't so, you know, barbaric. All right, well, I might leave this one here for now. Sending you so much peace, love, light, and blessings as always.